You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. To listen to previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello and welcome to episode 33 of Meet the Farmers. As it's lambing time, I can't stray too far away from home, so I've headed just down the road, and it's another Essex farm and Essex-based episode today. I'm in Oldham, near Colchester, meeting Guy and Emily French of Fox's Farm Produce. Guy and Emily run a heavily diversified business focused on seasonal produce, such as pumpkins and Christmas trees. They also have a corn maze and hold a farm mud run event in the summer. Guy and Emily, thank you for meeting me. This is your main sort of home site. We've been talking before. There's actually quite a complicated system in terms of you've got various different sites. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, so here we are at our main base, just outside Oldham. This is where we run all of our operations from, namely our wholesale pumpkins, our Christmas tree growing. Here we also have our pumpkin patches, mud runs, corn mazes, and then we have another site down at Basildon where we run the same pumpkin patches, Christmas trees, corn maze and mud run as well.
Emily, just in that list, Guy's been saying there's a huge amount going on here. How did it start? What did you start with and why?
Guy started the business when he was back in university, growing a variety of fresh produce. Then we met through Young Farmers.
Of course.
Of course, yeah, no, the dating agency. And actually the only way I could ever see Guy in the evenings was to come and help him pick the produce. So we quickly decided that we needed to focus on one or two crops just because there was too much going on. So we quickly decided on pumpkins due to the fact that they were lasting quite well in storage, and we could see the growing trend over from America that actually Halloween was going to become more popular. So we started off doing wholesale pumpkins as well as the Christmas trees, and then it was back in 2015 when we first opened our pumpkin patch, which was down in Basildon actually, and that was purely just because there seemed to be a trend of a lot of people saying, I wish I could pick my pumpkin from the field. So we capitalised on that, and we've been growing and growing since then, really.
Now, you're both from farming backgrounds. Did you both want to work on the land, with the land in some way growing up, or were you thinking about doing other things?
I'm actually a planning consultant as well as a farmer, so we have to so rural based, but we have to diversify what we do because the core farms that we grew up in were both arable farms, and arable on its own wasn't big enough for everybody to go onto, so we've had to come up with our own ideas, our own innovation.
I went to university, did a business administration degree and started working in London and then more locally in human resources department. And it only was when I started doing the wholesale pumpkins as well, I would say in my spare time, but I was having no spare time, so I was doing almost 24-hour working days, that then we decided that I needed to focus on the business full time. But it has been the best decision I've made. I love working on our business, on the farm, being outside. Every day is different. It's great.
Well, I'm assuming that that previous experience is partly critical to your success.
Yes, and actually the year I gave up my other job was the year that I managed to secure deals with the co-op so that we supply them, and really took the business to another level in terms of what I could do in terms of the marketing, all the accounting and all the back office jobs.
I know this area pretty well because it's just down the road, but for the benefit of listeners, why, Emily, is this a good place to set up a business that's focused mainly on direct sales, events, that kind of thing?
I think it's purely just the people. It's a really nice area here because it is rural, but it's also full of people, and they want to come to the farm, see what's around. Everyone's interested in what's going on. There's good links to London, so we actually have some visitors from London who come visit the pumpkin patches, who they do the mud run. So I think it's just the good access links. We're just off the A12.
I think we're in a very fortunate area in Essex in terms of population density. And that's been the success of our diversified enterprise. It's what works well for us here. We're lucky because we're unique with population. So.
Yeah. And do you find with, say, people who come and buy your pumpkins, will they come and return by your Christmas trees, or are you looking at different people for each?
Generally, yes, but people won't travel as far for Christmas trees, we found.
Okay.
Because there's different type of competition at Christmas time with garden centres, other farm attractions and other children-based attractions. But the market is definitely growing towards experiences rather than just buying the product. So that's how we try and offer our pumpkin patches. You're not just buying a pumpkin, you're learning about the varieties, you're walking over the farm, you're going through the corn maze, you're doing other things with an experience, and the mud runs are an experience as well. And Christmas trees, where customers can come and have an experience with it, is where the market's growing towards, in my opinion.
So you're supplying Co-op. That move into supermarkets, how was that as an experience in terms of setting up that relationship? How easy was it, and what's it like now?
So we were lucky when we started our relationship with the Co-op in that they are very keen on local suppliers. So they were keen to develop a relationship with us, and we then worked with them very closely. They came to the farm and they liked the fact that we were so local to them, and we actually were quite a good supplier of them because we supplied the Suffolk stores as well.
I also think that actually with the Co-op, they worked with us if there was a problem. So the first year we did our own distribution to them, and it just didn't work because we didn't have the logistics to fit their system. We were running a palletised system of pumpkins, and they wanted them individually on trolleys and things like that. So we actually met with them the next year, told them what our problems were and how we couldn't really make it work from our side, and they worked with a solution for us, so whereby they would start collecting from us, they'd be dropping the cages off on return loads, and then it worked, like clockwork on both sides.
You mentioned starting with logistics there. In terms of challenges that you faced, problems along the way, what have some of the bigger challenges been?
From my point of view, the pumpkin wholesale logistics is something that I constantly deal with on a daily basis in terms of when the order comes into me, I have to make sure that I put it on the right system for the distribution company to come to the farm, collect it, make sure Guy knows exactly what the order is so that he loads the right bins, then it gets sent off.
I think we've streamlined it quite a bit now, sort of learning from experience, really. So,
it's funny how you have to work on the bottom and make all the mistakes before it then moves on.
So we advertise, obviously, that we can distribute them all over the UK, which we can, and that goes out on a pallet network. But the problems we were finding that Emily was touching on was actually we were having to load lots of little lorries for lots of independent orders, whereas we actually worked with the lorry company who effectively take Arctic loads at a time, and then they sort and distribute from their end. So that just makes it a little bit easier in terms of logistics of loading and things like that. Other logistic problems is the distance between our sites as well. So different crops need different attention at different times. Sometimes we're not in the right place at the right time. They've got different challenges, different soil types, different nutrients, different indices, different soil temperatures, which is all quite important for pumpkins. So there's a challenge between the soil types on those two sites as well, because they're very different sites, but they command different markets. So the further south you go in Essex, the higher the population density, so the more cropping we need, but generally yields are lower down in South Essex because of the soil types, and it's harder to grow a vegetable crop on a heavier soil type.
Staffing wise, I imagine that this is quite seasonal in terms of staff requirements. How do you go about finding staff, and perhaps going into this year in particular, are you foreseeing challenges and any issues ahead?
It's funny you mention that, because Emily said that to me last night. We have self-employed labour that helps us on the farm, and that works really well. That generally tends to take a lot of the tractor work away from us, so we're working on the business. In terms of other help, we'll have a part-time office help as well. We're looking to take on more help temporarily during the pumpkin season in the office. On our events, we employ quite a lot of people. We can employ up to 30 people during the season, and that works on a rota-based system depending on how busy the site is. And then when we're harvesting pumpkins and Christmas trees, we use a recruitment agency. They're based in Ipswich. They're really good. They give us good labour, and we rely on that to harvest our crops.
We also do, as you know, Guy and I started the business together. Our families are heavily invested in it, and they like to see it doing well and succeeding. So they do kindly offer their help, don't they, when we need them to?
Yeah.
So we've just gone around the corner, and there is a wonderful field full of daffodils. Tell me about this.
So not everything works in terms of our diversification.
You've got to try something.
So actually, the daffodils I was really impressed with. We did a lot of research. We researched it for about a year. The co-op offered to take them off us, so we knew we had a ready market for them. And we thought, right, let's grow some daffodils. We did loads of research. In my opinion, grew a really good crop of daffodils. And then unfortunately, we just found that with daffodils, there's a price point in terms of economies of scale.
Yep.
So they're a cheap product to sell on. The retailer needs to make a profit on them. It's all about scale, and us as small producers couldn't compete with scale.
It doesn't work.
So we're very good that if something doesn't work, we knock it on the head straight away. And that's what we did. But yeah, the daffodils are still here, looking great.
I mean, they do look really good. Certainly brightens up the landscape. So the model that you have at the moment, in terms of pumpkins, Christmas trees, the mud run, and maze, are you fairly happy with that as a structure? Do you see trying anything else new? Or you reckon you'll stick with that for the time being?
Well, so far what we've been doing is trying to do one new thing a year,
Okay.
Maximum, just because we found that we take a lot of time to research everything, make sure that what we're going to do, fingers crossed, hopefully should work. And if you try to do too many things at once, we just found that our mind wasn't really structured on it.
What you'll find is a lot of the enterprises link together. So, our direct retail, it tends to link together. So we'll try and cross over and work off the back of that. How can we target our customers again? So using the mud run as an example, our pumpkin Christmas tree customers, they were targeted for the mud run as another direct event.
Yeah.
If we did another direct event, again, we would focus on that. So we're not branching too far away, although it might be a different angle in terms of enterprise. We'll try and use our existing customer base where we can like that and promote events to them. In terms of other crops, we've tried lots of crops. So when I started, I tried lots of different veg crops and stuff, and really, again, comes back to the daffodil argument of economies of scale and pinch point.
Christmas trees, I imagine, because they're a long-term crop, what's the amount of time between establishment and actually commercial reality in terms of being able to actually get something in cash-wise?
So yeah, they grow about a foot a year on average. So it will take about 6 years to get our first cut, and then we'll finish the plantation in the 10th year. So it's a 4-year harvest, and then we would recrop the plantation afterwards with an arable crop for a couple of years, bring the soil indices up in terms of nutrients, applying compost, weed control through that arable crop, ready for the next Christmas tree crop to go in again after.
Remind me of the acreage that you're growing now and how that's changed since you began.
So we're growing about 30 acres of Christmas trees. We started with 3 acres, and year on year, over that 10-year period, we've basically been planting on average about 3 acres a year. We've actually changed the business model with the Christmas trees slightly, in that we're trying to put more trees growing at our retail sites, which saves on our logistics for distribution, haulage to the retail sites, and it actually gives us a growing crop at the retail site for the customer to see or choose.
We were talking before we started recording about pruning. How intensive is management, other than, pruning is one aspect. How intensive is management in terms of meeting those specs?
The plantation works at about a third premium, a third standard grade, and a third grade. The premium grade are your best ones, the standard grade are your mid-range ones, and your third grade are the ones that you can't really sell. So you're always trying to bring up the premium grade where you can, and that's all through management of pruning, but there's a lot of maintenance to them. We will be spraying them during the season every 3 or 4 weeks for aphids, foliar feeds. We'll fertilise them twice a year, which helps with greening and keeping them green to make sure that they're not yellow. People don't want a yellow Christmas tree. And then there's other management like pruning, bud rubbing, leader control so that they don't get too spindly. But I'll probably just show you those bits when we go into the field because it'll be clearer.
Yeah. So the trees that we are just walking past now, what age are these?
These were planted in 2011 over there and 2012 here.
Okay.
So, and we started cutting the 2012 plantation this year, and they're all Nordman fir Christmas trees, which is the most popular one, but they're slower growing than the spruce trees.
But one thing that always amazes me about Christmas trees is that we can pick what we believe to be the perfect trees in the field, and then a tree that you think, oh, I'm not sure about that one, it will probably be the first one to go from the retail site.
It's always funny what people actually want.
Yeah, what people think of as the perfect Christmas tree is totally different.
What are some of the major disease issues with Christmas trees?
We have something called current season needle narcosis, which effectively makes all the needles fall off the tree. That's quite a big thing.
Not ideal.
Nationally, so then that's not ideal. The other thing is rust, really, on the needles as well. The main issue is aphids, which obviously disease the trees as well, so that doesn't help, and something called rust mite on the Nordman fir as well, but they can all be controlled agronomically as we need to. We're obviously always trying to aim for high ladybird numbers in the plantations.
Obviously, you are both incredibly busy people, but what do you get up to away from farming?
Luckily enough, we have a 1.5-year-old little boy, so I get to spend lots of time with him, and at the weekends we try and prize Guy away for one day so that we can do something family orientated, like normal things like go to the zoo.
I know
or
the struggle, I know
fun.
the struggle.
David, who works for us on the farm, he worked for us all through winter, and that's his first winter with us. And he said to me, what are you going to be doing on a pumpkin farm in January, February? And he said to me that we were busier than most arable farms that he'd worked on before. So
I can well believe it.
It's
one thing I was going to say is that because our harvest comes after everyone else's harvest, or the typical farming arable harvest, that we find that lots of our friends in the farming communities all then suddenly start having parties and barbecues, and we're the ones that can never go.
Yeah, exactly.
But luckily our friends are all very...
But interestingly, what's
caring.
not probably that well known is we'll start pumpkin harvest middle of August, so along with the arable harvest, we'll start pumpkin harvesting right through till sort of start of October, and then October's distribution. November's then Christmas tree harvest and setting up the retail sites. December's obviously selling them. And then after that it's clearing up, maintaining all the machinery, and then during the spring we're doing all the land work for next year. And because we're quite spread out, it's not as quick as doing it in one big field. It's lots of fields in lots of places, so it takes quite a bit of time to get around it.
Is Halloween as I'm going to use the American term holiday, is Halloween growing more, and is that having an impact on you? In the UK?
Definitely, it's a growing market. People love Halloween. I was brought up when I was younger, we didn't do anything for Halloween. We carved a pumpkin, we didn't go trick-or-treating or anything. Whereas people are loving the experience of going pumpkin picking. They dress up in their Halloween costumes. It's a real event, and it's definitely something that I would say more people now than ever are celebrating, and they really are getting into the fun of it.
So pumpkins, let's talk growing pumpkins.
Yeah.
How are you drilling them? What spacing are you doing? Some of the basic agronomy behind growing a pumpkin. I think I've only ever grown a few in my garden. That's about. I can't even think about doing it on a field scale.
Well, that's where we started. So trialling out some in the garden like that. We've learnt a lot, and like I said earlier, we've made mistakes. We've trialled with different experiences. But effectively, we are working the soil in the spring to get it fine enough to enable us to drill if there's any drought periods. It's quite common in May when we drill them to actually have no rainfall for 4-6 weeks beforehand.
So I can't imagine what it was like last year.
Yeah, so you've got to work a system that gets the seed bed fine enough in time for drilling, otherwise you could end up with a cloddy field, and then that's not going to do the pumpkins any favours. You've got to get the soil temperature right to make sure it's warm enough so that they grow quickly. Your soil indices and nutrients are important, so we've experimented between liquid fertiliser and granular fertiliser, the liquid being more available to the plant. But last year, I think when it was too dry, the liquid didn't actually benefit the crop because it wasn't mobile enough in the store for it. We'll plant them in May, and we will spray them with an agronomy programme, mainly protecting against powdery mildew, aphids and weeds. We'll run a hoe through them in terms of weed control. And if you've got a good growing season, they'll be away. They're quite drought tolerant in terms of they're very deep rooting. but last year that was a real test. And I did wonder whether it was ever going to rain, and it's all quickly forgotten after, but at the time it was a little bit concerning. And then we will start harvesting, like I say, middle of August through till end of September. And then it goes straight back into an arable rotation after, so, first wheat or whatever that goes in behind it. In terms of spacing, we've actually modified our system. The wider the spacing, the bigger the pumpkins in theory, but we know what size we want for our markets, so we try and use the right varieties and the right spacing to hit our size. And we're effectively on 1.2 metre wide rows, which also fits our Christmas tree system, which is on 1.2 metre wide rows. So then all the equipment crosses over between the two enterprises. We could probably get away with 90 centimetres to a metre spacing on pumpkins, but actually it's more important that we can cross-use all that equipment and rent a little bit more land to get our yield is fine with us. So.
And how many varieties have you had to try before you've centred on what works?
Lots. So the pumpkin patch varieties are very different to the wholesale varieties. Wholesale, we're going purely for orange pumpkins and bulk and maximum yield and maximum storage capability. Whereas in the pumpkin patches, we're going for the wackiest colours, the wackiest sizes and things like that.
It's one of my favourite jobs. I get to go choose all the pumpkins that we have in the patches, because I go for different colours. I go for kind of warty ones, ones that look like swans, ones that are flat.
I think it's the amazing thing about that sort of whole squash family, isn't it? The variety literally is, it's massive.
And the fact that most of them can be cooked as well. And are tasty, so we do a lot of different ones.
It's a good sign of autumn though, pumpkins. When you see the colours in the field, it's really rewarding to walk around what is a brown ploughed field now, and then you come September time and it's colours and we've got the maize in the background, and it looks really rewarding at that time of year. So.
Do you find people who come and buying direct off you will be buying pumpkins to eat?
I think
or asking about eating them?
Yeah, they're asking about eating them a lot more. So we grow a pumpkin called a Crown Prince, which is a grey squash with bright orange flesh, and it is one of the best pumpkins to eat. And people are often, some people do carve it because it makes a great ghost pumpkin, but lots of people do take that to eat. And they're asking lots more for recipes, pumpkins, soup and pasta, and I'm definitely thinking it's more of a trend. I follow people like Deliciously Ella and all of her healthy recipes. They use so much squash and pumpkin that I think people are trying to find it and loving the fact that they can actually go and pick up a spaghetti squash and use that instead of actual pasta.
I think in the supermarkets though, the squash is not that well known, because we were going to trial our different squash varieties with the co-op, and their feedback initially was actually we tried it before, people just don't understand what the crop is and what they could do with the crop. Last year we did actually trial some different varieties with them, but it's a constant introducing market, and you notice yourself when you're walking around the shops and the supermarkets, there's a very small product line compared to something like courgettes or green beans or sweet corn, which are, say, much more popular and easy to take off the shelves.
I often ask this question.
Mainly because I'm just interested in this.
No. Emily can answer.
If it's Brexit, no way. I've already said that.
What gets you out of bed in the morning? Because a lot of people would look at this and think this is a huge amount of hard work. It's incredibly rewarding, and my goodness, I'm just looking around this field now. You just know. Especially, I'm thinking back to our own sea buckthorn crop at home. And the time and the hours and the care and the effort that goes into all of it. But once you've built something, it is the most rewarding thing. But on a day-to-day basis, what do you love about the job?
I like being my own boss. I like the adventure and the exploring, the new ideas. We're always building on things, and you think back to a few years ago, you thought, God, if the business ever got to this scale, I'd be really content. And then it gets past that and you think, wow, okay. And so you just keep looking at more and more ideas, ways to add value. I'm always looking at ways to simplify things and make things more efficient to make sure it's working for us, which we've only learnt through experience really and doing it.
I love the fact that we are seasonal. So now is a bit of a downtime, but come October the adrenaline is insane. And especially I love the people facing parts of the role, so that's why I do all the customer sales, etc. And when you walk around the patches, which I do every day when they're open, if I'm not actually working on site, the feedback you hear, the families, it's unbelievable. It's amazing. We try and use the pumpkin patches to educate the children about pumpkins, about the farm. So we have lots of boards up about, pumpkins are grown this way, corn is grown this way, and I just think it's amazing, the feedback and the fact that people love it so much. And it is also a bonus that we do get to work together, which does have its benefits and
downfalls.
Yeah.
Do you work well together?
Yeah, we're all right actually.
It's better I think than people think it could be.
Yeah.
We're lucky that we have different skill sets,
Exactly,
which complement each other. The annoying thing I would say is that Guy's not very good at switching off. So even when you go on a holiday, if you've got like a 5-hour drive somewhere, I know that the first thing he says when he gets in the car is, right, we've got 5 hours together, let's have a business meeting. Whereas I'm thinking, let's whack open the Haribo and relax.
Just to get away, finally.
Yeah.
But we've got different skills, and I think that's where we complement on each other. Emily's better with sort of marketing, sales, people, customer facing. I'm better at sort of the technical detail, the agronomy, the farming, and that side of things, and the planning, aren't I, and strategy.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually recording it when you were talking about it, but when you were, I thought this is really, really good. So I want to talk about it now. Guy, you were talking about as the younger generation within ag, and how perhaps the situation is different now certainly for startups, and perhaps for adapting existing businesses as well. Why do you think that is, and what advice, based on both of your experience so far, could you give to someone who's thinking about entering the sector? What should they be looking out for?
So yeah, just going back to what we were speaking about earlier, it was the high barriers to entry through capital investment, both in terms of agricultural machinery, access to farmland. So we were using an example that if you wanted to farm 250 acres of land, then you'd have to have £2.5 million in the bank, or finance to £2.5 million to be able to go and get that. So the younger entrants are, I think, in my opinion, very innovative. I think everyone's very positive, but I think you have to think differently and more dynamically. So you're finding things like contract farming agreements, share farming agreements, machinery sharing opportunities, and diversification. I mean, our entry into farming has been through diversification. Really, we couldn't have got into farming if we just wanted to go and set up an arable farm. We had to diversify and find these niche crops. And you have to have the passion for what you're doing. We had a huge amount of passion for pumpkins and Christmas trees, so we've made a lot of mistakes at the start. We still make mistakes now, but there's positives that come out of those mistakes to get the business to where it is now. And I think you have to believe in what you're going to do, and once you've found that niche, but you do have to try a few things to get there. But when we started, we would just borrow machinery, and then we would possibly rent some machinery at times during seasons. And then eventually the business gets to a scale where we can then buy our own machinery. And we do very much look at it on a business case now, where if we need to rent additional equipment, we rent it at certain times. And it's all about having that business plan to making sure it works, I think. Would you say, Em?
Yes, I would agree with that. Like you said about the passion, that's one thing that we are totally switched on. We know all about, I know as much about pumpkins as you do.
But we're also very aware of our costs and the markets that we go into. So using daffodils as an example, we thought there was a market, we went into it, we knew what we were in for when we went into it, and we were happy if it went wrong. We were comfortable with that. And using that as an example, we realised very quickly what the problem was. It was the price pinch point in terms of where those daffodils could get sold retail. And we realised very quickly that rather than continue to pursue that, it just wasn't going to work. So we stopped it. We didn't try and follow it when we knew it wasn't working. But then that is a bit of a contrast to the pumpkins. When I said to Emily 2 or 3 years in, we'll stop it. But, it was all about just trying to think, well, how can we do things differently? And that's how the Pick Your Own came along, which then helped the investment in the wholesale to then make the wholesale work. But some of that was a bit of luck, but it was believing in that product for a little time before we went through to it. And I'm not saying that everybody has to go into a diversified enterprise as a younger entrant, but I think you have to think of something different, whether it be contracting and doing something in addition as well as working with something. So like I say, I worked as a planning consultant doing this alongside it, so I had to find other income streams to make it work. It didn't just sort of start from its own 2 feet and be self-sufficient on its own to start with. It did over time, but not to start with.
Now, I should have warned you about this. There's a relatively new thing on the podcast called the 1 minute soapbox, which gives guests an opportunity to speak for 1 minute about a subject of their choice. That could be anything. That could be farming related. It could be Christmas related. It could be pumpkin related. It could be non-farming. It could be a cause or concern that you're passionate about. It could be Brexit.
Emily could talk for an hour on
but hopefully not Brexit.
Definitely not Brexit for me. I thought you might ask a Brexit question. I'd already been pre-warned, guys. If it's a Brexit question,
with
I'm
9 days
answering
to
it.
go until Brexit Day, I'm purposefully avoiding the question because it's definitely not something I want to think about right now. But yeah, so it's a 1 minute to talk on a subject of your choice.
So I'm going to be talking about moving from a corporate world into the agricultural self-employed world.
Very nice. Your 1 minute starts now.
Okay, so when I worked for a corporate company, it's very different. You've got people around you all the time, lots of tea breaks, and you have to do things as someone tells you to. When I moved to work for our business on your own, there were some things that were totally new to me, and some things have made me get better, I suppose, by doing the corporate world first. So I've brought in things like SOPs guides, event management plans, and just a better way of doing things properly. But the things that were alien to me, I suppose, were the fact that I had to learn a business totally from new, such as chemical names, what the different crops were called, and how we used the different machinery for what.
15 seconds.
Oh, but there were some totally changes, like when you speak to different suppliers. Now I'm totally confident with them. I know what I'm talking about when I go to places like
3,
Pan Anglia.
2.
When I didn't
1.
before.
That was super. Well done.
Bill Pan Anglia.
Thank you.
I don't know why I hadn't thought
Thank
of
you
Pan
for being
Anglia.
such a good sport. Guy and Emily, thank you so much for having me today and
Thanks,
just letting me have a look round. I wish you the absolute best for the year ahead, all your various ventures, and I know that you're going to do bright things ahead. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.
Guy and Emily French on their farm near Colchester. Next time, I'll be speaking to the chair of Corston Press, entrepreneur and Suffolk organic farmer William Kendall. I hope you can join me for that. In the meantime, you can catch all previous episodes at thinkingcountry.com, or the last 10 episodes on iTunes, where you can also subscribe to the podcast. For now, though, have a great day, and I'll catch you soon on Meet the Farmers.